grabación en este momento. Como decía, nuevamente doy la bienvenida a los panelistas, a los asistentes, a esta sesión, que es la sesión 11C sobre terminología y terminografía. Y por supuesto, pues como he comentado también en sesiones anteriores, aprovecho para dar las gracias a todos, pensando que tal vez tengáis que marchar en algún momento y no quiero dejar de decirlo, no quiero que se me olvide dar las gracias anticipadas por el esfuerzo y por la difusión del conocimiento. Así que sin más preámbulo, dado que ya estamos en hora, le voy a dar la palabra a Pilar Pérez Cañizares de la Universidad Complutense de Madrid, si no me equivoco.
Pues no, de la Wirtschaftsuniversität Wien.
Es que igual he cogido el dato no actualizado, probablemente.
Exacto, sí, puede ser un dato antiguo, correcto.
Sí. Discúlpame, Pilar, porque ya digo, he anotado y no he caído en la cuenta. Y bueno, la comunicación que nos va a presentar Pilar se titula de cómo la sostenibilidad desbancó a la responsabilidad social corporativa, análisis terminológico de páginas web empresariales. Sin más, muchísimas gracias de nuevo, Pilar, te cedo la palabra directamente. Gracias.
Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Eva. Bienvenidos, muchas gracias por estar aquí y empiezo esta presentación. Ha estado en la sesión anterior mi colega Johann Schnitzer, que ya ha contado que en nuestra institución nos divertimos trabajando con temas de RSC, de responsabilidad social corporativa. Y lo que os presento hoy es un estudio en el que he realizado una comparación en cómo las empresas comunican acerca de este tema en sus páginas web. Y es una comparación entre España e Hispanoamérica. Y bueno, este estudio, ¿dónde surge? El punto de partida, pues, es básicamente el uso confuso e intercambiable que hay de los términos RSC, responsabilidad social corporativa o responsabilidad corporativa, y sostenibilidad. Estos son términos que son difusos, a veces se usan como sinónimos y que es difícil definir. Y es difícil definirlos no solo para las empresas, sino también a los estudiosos de ciencias empresariales, de las escuelas de negocio, pues tienen problemas para distinguirlos, para separarlos. Se intenta distinguir, pero finalmente incluso los estudiosos los usan como sinónimos. De hecho, hay un estudioso, Van Marrebeek, que utiliza la sigla CSR entre paréntesis para abarcar los dos términos, ¿no? Y podríamos usarlo en español también, pues dándole la vuelta a las siglas. Bueno, pues, ¿en qué consiste el estudio? Pues esta investigación acerca de RSC y o sostenibilidad en las páginas web la he realizado básicamente a partir de tres perspectivas, que es desde las que se suelen estudiar las páginas web. En primer lugar, pues bueno, la usabilidad, la accesibilidad y la localización de los temas en una página web. Luego otros estudiosos pues también han comparado la información sobre RSC que aparece en las páginas web dependiendo del sector de la empresa, del país, de la región en que aparece. Y también hay un grupo de estudios que se han dedicado para determinar la evolución de las páginas web respecto a esta comunicación de RSC. Estas tres perspectivas son las que yo he tomado también en mi estudio. Y bueno, ¿por qué es el estudio necesario? He considerado. En principio, la comunicación corporativa en español, desde un punto de vista lingüístico, es algo que apenas está estudiado. En segundo lugar, pues no se tiene en cuenta la gran variedad, la gran amplitud del idioma español, en tanto que lengua corporativa, comparando empresas españolas o hispanoamericanas. Y, bueno, pues por último nos encontramos con que Respecto a las páginas web, pues la tecnología evoluciona mucho más rápido que la investigación, con lo cual, si en la bibliografía hay artículos que se refieren a páginas web escritos en el año 2000, pues hoy en día están totalmente desfasados porque la web de 2020 no tiene demasiado que ver con la web del año 2000. Bueno, los objetivos del estudio. Yo, al plantearme esta investigación, me los planteé a través de 4 preguntas de investigación. En primer lugar, ¿cuál es el grado de accesibilidad de la información sobre RSC que aparece en las páginas web? ¿Qué terminología es la que utilizan las empresas para hablar de RSC? En tercer lugar, si existe alguna diferencia entre España e Hispanoamérica en estos temas de accesibilidad y la terminología. Y por último, retomando este hilo de investigaciones dedicadas a la evolución de la comunicación corporativa a lo largo del tiempo, identificar posibles cambios en la terminología sobre RSC en las páginas web. ¿Cómo he hecho esto? Pues bueno, mi corpus de estudio lo han formado 26 empresas españolas. Son un grupo de empresas españolas incluidas en un índice que se llama el Foods for Good. Son empresas que son buenas o especialmente buenas en temas de sostenibilidad y responsabilidad. Y un grupo de 42 empresas latinoamericanas incluidas en un índice similar, en este caso el Dow Jones Sustainability Index. ¿Qué hice? Pues realizar una captura de pantalla de las páginas web y un protocolo de itinerario de navegación realizado entre marzo y mayo de 2019 y donde ha sido posible he comparado las versiones más recientes de la página web, que en mi caso son de 2019, con versiones anteriores, archivadas en lugares como Wayback Machine. En total, he trabajado un corpus de 536 capturas de pantalla de páginas web. Voy a los resultados. ¿Qué tenemos? Pues bueno, ya he dicho que las empresas seleccionadas son empresas que son especialmente buenas en rankings de sostenibilidad, con lo cual, pues todas excepto 2 presentan información sobre RSC o sostenibilidad en sus páginas web. Esto no es sorprendente. Quizá lo sorprendente es que haya 2 que no lo presenten. Y la gran mayoría presentan esta información inmediatamente en el primer nivel de la página web. De las 12 restantes, 9 en el segundo nivel y 3 en el tercer nivel. Explico más claramente a qué me refiero con esto. Nosotros entramos directamente a la página web y nos encontramos con que en el propio menú, sin necesidad de hacer ningún clic, encontramos un epígrafe que hace referencia a alguno de estos temas. Respecto a la segunda pregunta, terminología, variación terminológica. ¿Cómo se llaman estos temas en concreto en las páginas web? Pues aquí, con la variación de colores, quizá ya se puede ver o anunciar uno de los resultados. En color azul están los términos que tienen que ver con la responsabilidad. En amarillo figuran los términos que tienen que ver con la sostenibilidad, sustentabilidad. Mientras que tenemos algunas empresas que se salen de esta dicotomía y utilizan otros términos. Si comparamos España e Hispanoamérica, aquí pues ya podemos ver directamente que en España hay una división, aun si la sostenibilidad es más frecuente que la responsabilidad, parece que está algo más repartido el resultado, mientras que en Hispanoamérica pues tenemos casi solo un uso de sostenibilidad o de alguno de sus derivados y muy poca responsabilidad. En general, Otro tema importante aquí es la posible variación entre formación de neologismos, oposición entre sostenibilidad y sustentabilidad, que es lo que de entrada pensamos que dicen en Hispanoamérica. Pues bueno, España y Colombia usan sin excepción la palabra sostenibilidad. No se habla en Colombia de sustentabilidad, a pesar de que de entrada pudiera parecer otra cosa. México y Chile parece que usan arbitrariamente los dos términos, sostenibilidad y sustentabilidad. Sin embargo, las empresas que se definen a sí mismas como globales tienden a usar el término sostenibilidad.
5 minutos, Pilar.
Sí. Bueno, pues os comento ahora el que para mí es el resultado más interesante, que es el estudio diacrónico de la evolución, de cómo realmente la sostenibilidad ha desbancado o está desbancando a la responsabilidad. Y si veis este gráfico en el que se comparan los usos desde el año 2007 al 2019, y se ve claramente cómo el uso de los términos relacionados con la responsabilidad se ha ido reduciendo paulatinamente, y podemos ver que en Hispanoamérica la tendencia es exactamente la misma, con la salvedad de que las empresas hispanoamericanas tardan más en hablar de estos temas, empiezan más tarde, pero en este sentido son incluso más rápidas en cuanto a la evolución, saltan directamente al tren de la sostenibilidad y reducen o eliminan la responsabilidad incluso más rápido que las empresas españolas. En general, ¿qué conclusiones, qué discusión podemos tener aquí? Pues bueno, los términos relacionados con la responsabilidad han perdido importancia. Es un término que en las empresas se ha pasado de moda en relación con la sostenibilidad. Se mantiene en el sector servicios en España y algunas empresas van más allá de dicotomía y crean otros términos más amplios, más difusos. Las empresas hispanoamericanas comienzan más tarde a hablar de RSC. En una primera fase hay cierta variación, pero la tendencia a preferir sostenibilidad llega más rápido que en España. En este sentido, son más innovadoras y más rápidas. Y bueno, para mostrar un poco cómo se produce este cambio terminológico, y creo que puedo demostrar de manera bastante clara que el cambio de los términos no lleva consigo un cambio más profundo respecto al entendimiento o la distinción entre responsabilidad y sostenibilidad, sino que podemos ver aquí con un ejemplo de la empresa Santander, Banco de Santander, cómo ha ido evolucionando la etiqueta que se le pone a este ámbito desde el año 2009 al año 2020. En algunos casos, como 2019-2020, un cambio va ligado a un nuevo cambio de diseño de la página web, a una nueva estrategia de comunicación, quizá de relaciones públicas también, pero en muchos de los otros casos no es así. Y si uno tiene la suerte de poder acceder a niveles más profundos de la página web, pues puede llegar a ver que se trata de un cambio simplemente de etiqueta. Una empresa se siente obligada a ponerse al día en cuanto a etiquetas de palabras que son las que debe utilizar uno en cierto momento, una empresa, pero que cuya definición pues no se tiene muy clara. Ahí vemos que la definición de compromiso social de 2009 coincide totalmente con la descripción de sostenibilidad de 2011 para Santander. Y esto se ve también en Latinoamérica, ejemplo del Banco BCI de Chile, que pasa de responsabilidad social empresarial en 2009 a sustentabilidad en 2014, y realmente sin ningún tipo de explicación clara cambia la sustentabilidad por la sostenibilidad en 2019. Y Bueno, la parte buena que ha tenido el retraso de el Congreso entre textos un año es que me ha dado tiempo a publicar la investigación, entre tanto, que habría presentado un poco menos terminada el año pasado y está en prensa ya en esta revista. Bueno, eso es todo, ¿no? Espero haberme atenido al tiempo correctamente y
Perfectamente, Pilar.
gracias, Eva.
Perfectamente. Además, coincidencia, ahora mismo ha marcado 16 el minuto, con lo cual, muy bien. Muchísimas gracias por ajustar el tiempo y por transmitir todos estos detalles en el mínimo tiempo posible, lo cual también es un mérito adicional. Y bueno, me alegra que el hecho de que hayamos retrasado el Congreso, aunque haya sido por circunstancias más adversas de lo que quisiéramos, pues haya permitido que la publicación ya sea un hecho. Así que nada, lo dicho, muchísimas gracias. Voy a pasar al chat para ver si hay alguna pregunta o alguien ha matizado algo. En principio no veo preguntas. Voy a mirar también en la zona de preguntas y respuestas. No me aparece nada en principio. Bueno, pero a mí me ha llamado mucho la atención porque yo creo que no hubiera pensado que existe una coincidencia tan exacta entre el término sostenibilidad y el de responsabilidad social. Sí que es cierto que en términos corporativos eso tiene cabida, pero yo no había caído realmente. Y es verdad que son términos muy afines y no sé hasta qué punto uno va a llegar a sustituir al otro. Bueno, ya comentabas que la tendencia está en que sostenibilidad se prime, ¿no? Se ponga a la cabeza, pero la verdad es que me ha llamado la atención la coincidencia, ¿no? La afinidad de conceptos en los que no había reparado, sinceramente. Así
Bueno, sí,
que
es curioso porque yo creo que si nos ponemos fuera de un lenguaje especializado,
ujú,
para un hablante normal en lengua, pues hay una distinción clarísima entre lo que podría ser responsable y ser sostenible. En cualquier caso, yo creo que la confusión viene por la propia investigación en ciencias empresariales, que por una parte se ha preocupado en distinguir los dos términos, pero a la hora de la verdad se meten los dos en el mismo saco. Y bueno, pues en español y en inglés, el hecho de contar con una sigla, RSC,
ujú.
pues ha marcado cierto éxito al uso, porque es algo que es eh, un poco especializado lo justo y uno parece que lo usa uno como término técnico. Entonces, por eso se ha mantenido en el tiempo, ¿no? Pero ahora un poco la tendencia también de pensamiento es comunicar que una empresa debe ser responsable por esencia, y que no es un plus que sean responsables, tiene que ser así, con lo cual la responsabilidad parece que se barre, nadie hace gala de ser responsable porque lo debería ser ya, ¿no? Entonces ahí es un poco el juego que
Sí,
hay.
los presupuestos. Muchísimas gracias, Pilar, de verdad, por toda la aportación, por el esfuerzo y por haberlo trasladado con esta precisión. Y bueno, voy a trasladarle, acabo de ver que Juan Carlos Gil Berrozpe se ha conectado finalmente, entonces lo que voy a hacer es trasladarle el rol de presentador para que pueda iniciar, para que pueda empezar a compartir su material y de nuevo te agradezco a ti la contribución. Muchísimas gracias, Pilar.
Gracias.
Muy interesante. En tu caso, Juan Carlos, no sé si me oyes bien, ¿verdad?
Correcto.
Vale, perfecto. Pues he pasado el rol de presentador de manera que ahora mismo debes tener un botón de compartir al lado de detener vídeo para poder
Sí, lo
compartir
veo.
el material. ¿Lo ves, verdad? Si quieres, probamos antes que sea visible.
Perfecto, pues a ver, debería estar ya disponible por aquí. presentación en pantalla
Es
completa.
importante que lo despliegues antes, eso es.
Ahí está.
Vale, se ve perfectamente. Perfecto.
Sí, por suerte, por desgracia, ya cuento con experiencia en estas cosillas. De hecho, acabo de volver rapidísimo de la facultad, porque por parte de la Universidad de Granada estamos con semipresencialidad de vuelta y
Ujú.
nos toca a los docentes ir allí en persona. Entonces, me disculpo en primer lugar por mi retraso en haber accedido a la sala, porque he venido lo antes posible de vuelta a casa. En cuanto termine esto, me toca comer y rapidísimamente después volver a la facultad. Y bueno, pero bueno, ya esto nos permite curtirnos en la batalla de la virtualidad, ¿no?
Efectivamente, efectivamente. O sea que bienvenido también y no te preocupes, nos hacemos cargo de que esto funciona así ahora, tal cual comentabas. Eso sí, sin más preámbulos voy a pasar a presentarte. Entiendo que la comunicación es tuya, de Juan Carlos Gil Berrozpe y también de Melania Cabezas García, ambos de la Universidad de Granada. Y la comunicación que vais a presentar es a Terminological Template for Describing Hyponymic Information in Chemical Terms. ¿Sí?
Así
Te
es.
paso directamente la palabra. It's your turn then. And thank you so
Precisamente
much for your...
iba a
¿Sí?
preguntar si la presentación la debería realizar en inglés o en español, porque
Lo que
está
tú
preparada
quieras.
para... Dependerá
Eh,
ya de la asistencia, si por casualidad todos los asistentes son españoles, no sé, pero...
no la verdad es que no estoy segura, pero como tú te sientas más cómodo, si te apetece en español, perfecto. If you like in English, no problem at all. So you decide
Bueno,
what way.
me voy a ceñir entonces al idioma en el que está diseñado tanto la investigación como la presentación y ya paso lista.
Ujú.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here today at this virtual conference. So first of all, I appreciate to Eva Llorens, to the rest of contributors of this conference, to the organizing committee, all the effort you've made to make this possible. It's been, well, it is, and it's been a hard period for everyone, and we appreciate all your effort and dedication to carrying out these kind of events. So Melania and I, we are lecturers and researchers of the University of Granada, and we belong to the Lexicon group. It is a group specialized in terminology. We have been working over the past years in different aspects related to concept visualization, knowledge representation, terminology, the development of terminological and translation resources. And actually, the core of this presentation is based on Ecolexicon, which is an environmental terminological knowledge base, which contains around 4,500 environmental concepts and around 23,500 terms in different languages. Most of them are in English and in Spanish, but we also have other languages such as Arabic, Russian, Greek, French, and so on. So the framework of the research I wanted to present here is based on three different disciplines. Terminology, which is a discipline that studies language and the relationship between terms and concepts. Terminography, which is the practical application of terminology in order to develop dictionaries and other linguistic resources describing the semantic, syntagmatic, and paradigmatic relationships of language. And cognitive linguistics, because it is a discipline that combines knowledge and research from neuropsychology and linguistics to develop models that describe linguistic and terminological elements as they are displayed in the human mind. So, taking this into account, this is what is behind the development of Ecolexicon. Its general interface displays a group of concepts linked to other concepts through conceptual relations, which can be type of relations, made of relations, non-hierarchical relations, such as causes, attribute of studies, etc. And here in this section of the screen, you can select which conceptual relations you want to display. Actually, they can be grouped in three main groups: generic specific relations, part-whole relations, and non-hierarchical relations. And it is interesting to see that inside our research group and this terminological resource, we have many different kinds of non-hierarchical relations, also many different kinds of part-for relations, but concerning general specific relations, we have only distinguished a general type of relation so far. So the objective of the study behind what we wanted to present here today is hyponymy refinement. So it is hyponymy refinement. It is important because it is the semantic relation between a generic concept and a specific concept, and it is one of the most basic elements in terminology work because it is behind taxonomies and concept hierarchies. So in order to define a hyponym, the definition always begins with a reference to the hypernym. So it has to be very clear what is the hierarchy in terminological field. Terminology, in this case, has been studied or analyzed through a three-faceted approach of description, categorization, and representation. Description is based on specification of subtypes and hyponymic contexts. Categorization involves tagging concepts through ontological categories. And finally, representation, which is the main objective of this presentation, is the development of a hyponymy-based terminological template and resource. So the main material for our research is the Ecolexicon English corpus, which is made of almost 70 million words. But for this specific study, we took into account the chemical subcorpus made of almost 3 million words. This corpus was uploaded to Sketch Engine, a corpus analysis tool, and a wide range of Sketch Engine functionalities is used, such as filtering the corpus to obtain hyponymic concordances, applying default and customized word sketches to extract the hyponymic information, etc. And accordingly, one of the most recent approaches to the study of hyponymy and other conceptual relations is actually corpus analysis, because it is useful to find terms in large corpora, to extract syntactic and semantic information, and to identify the specific knowledge patterns that codify semantic relations between terms in knowledge-rich contexts. So in terms of the description of hyponymy, there has been different ways to describe hyponymy, but we decided to focus on the description of hyponymy subtypes. Actually, we did this already a couple of years ago. Well, it was in 2017. We carried out a pilot study where we identified a series of potential hyponymy subtypes, which could be attributed to the different hyponyms in order to describe this kind of relation in a more specific, with a more specific nuance, such as state-based hyponymy, formation-based hyponymy, agent-based hyponymy, result-based hyponymy. And along with these subtypes, we identified a series of hyponymic contexts classifiable in several categories. These contexts are the syntactic formula used to describe hyponymy. So a hypernym such as hyponym, hypernym types such as hyponym, hyponym, and hyponym, etc. So these are examples, for example, for instance, sorry for the repetition, of an enhanced conceptual network involved with this kind of hyponymy subtypes. So with different colors, we can see that it is possible to specify or to establish similarities in the kinds of subtypes that are described. But we thought that this kind of description of knowledge can be perhaps messy for some users. So we decided to find a better way to represent these subtypes. And in terms of hyponymic contexts, these are some examples of those contexts I have just mentioned. So plant hormones such as auxins, cytokinins, acetic acid, angiosperms including poplar, rice, and tobacco, just as a visual example of what kind of context can be found with this corpus analysis. So after carrying out this description, there was the need to carry out an enhanced ontological classification of the environmental concepts in ecolexicon, because we found out that depending on the hypernym and hyponym pairs, there were differences in terms of the categories to which those concepts belonged. So we carried out a classification of all the 4,500 concepts in ecolexicon in different semantic classes based on concept definitions, on the contextual information extracted from the ecolexicon corpus, and on the ontological classes from similar resources, such as the environmental ontology. So we established...
Juan Carlos, 5 minutes, sorry.
All right, thanks.
Sorry.
We established a total of 152 conceptual categories, which can be specified up to 5 levels, depending on how general or specific the concept is. This is an example of this hierarchical categorization, and we can see that, for example, measuring instrument is a kind of instrument, which is a kind of artifact, which is a kind of creation, and which belongs to the broad category of entity. So, having done all of this, we decided to find a better way to represent this hyponymic information in our resource, in ecolexicon. In terminology, most of resources stick to the classical Aristotelian definition. It is a definition that takes the hypernym, which is the genus, and then specifies a series of characteristics of the genus that differentiates this concept from other cohyponyms. In this case, denitrification. So microbial process is the genus, and of reducing nitrate and nitrite to gaseous forms of nitrogen, etc., are the differential. So this is the classical Aristotelian definition that we intended to achieve for every concept with our resource, right? So we decided to create a terminological template with a hyponymic approach. For this purpose, we use Lexonomy, which is a public and free resource available at lexonomy.eu, funded by different European funds. The entries for this resource are written in XML, so they are fully customizable, and we decided to include the following essential elements in this resource: the parent concept, the child concept, the terminological definitions, the conceptual categories, the hyponymy subtypes, and, if available, hyponymic context of hyponyms. So this is exactly the entry structure as designed in XML, in the language that is used by Lexonomy to create the templates. And here we have the main screen for hypolexicon, okay? It is not ecolexicon, it is an ecolexicon byproduct following this terminological template that is focused on representing hyponymic nuances of environmental concepts. So it includes definitional, relational, ontological, and contextual information about specialized hyponyms and hyponyms. And precisely for the purpose of this presentation, we carried out 3 terminological entries of 3 chemistry concepts, because we found out that chemical elements are very useful in terms of the hyponymic information they contain and how hypernyms relate to hyponyms. So here, for example, we have a screenshot of the denitrification concept. We can see, for example, that there is a search bar to find other entries. The number 2 is the hypernym. Number 3 is the concept category of the hypernym. Number 4 is the definition following this Aristotelian definition. Number 5 is the subtype of hyponymy that has been identified with the respective hyponym in number 6, sedimentary identification here. Then number 7 would be a hyponymic context extracted from the corpus, the comical corpus. And then in number 8, we have a quick access column to other entries already included in the resource. So just to finish, I would like to show here a segment of the entry for sludge, which is a semi-solid or mud or sediment that is usually produced from a range of industrial processes. We can see how sewage sludge also has a synonym, and its definition inherits the properties of the hypernym sludge. Then we would have treated sludge as a method-based hyponym, and inside of treated sludge we can distinguish three main hyponyms also based on the method for treated sludge: primary sludge, secondary sludge, and tertiary sludge. So this is a new kind of terminological resource that has not been proposed before, because it includes the description information related to hyponymy subtypes, the ontological information related to concept categories, the definitional information related to these Aristotelian definitions, and finally, contextual information with those hyponymic context extracted from the corpus analysis. So to conclude, we found out with this study that chemical terms are good candidates for showcasing this type of information, but further research should also be focused on hyponyms on other fields of knowledge, such as biology and civil engineering, which are also interesting, and on having all the information validated by environmental experts. The aim in the end is to, in future work, implement this standalone byproduct, hypolexicon, into the whole resource, into Ecolexicon, in a certain way. But at the moment, the only thing we can do is carry out this standalone byproduct, and then we will see in the upcoming years how it can be, well, in upcoming months and years, how it can be implemented. So thank you very much for your attention. There you have our websites for our research group, our terminological resource, our email addresses, mine and also Melania's email address, and we will be eager to answering any question you have or to listening to any feedback you can provide. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks to you, Juan Carlos. It was a pleasure. It was our pleasure to hold that and receive this information, which is really interesting in your communication. And now let's see whether there are questions on the chat. Any questions? Yes, there is a question. Lucia Jimenez Navarro, who asks, do you have a template for the implementation of collocations or other PUs?
Sorry, for collocations or phraseological units?
Yeah, phraseological units, sorry.
Not in my case, because my research is focused only on hypernyms and hyponyms, and they can be multi-word terms in terms of containing more than one modifier or one or more modifiers. But in case of also containing phraseology, there are a couple of colleagues who are also working on those aspects. In that case, you should check out the work done by Miriam Buendia Castro, who is the expert in our research group on phraseology and those elements. So please check out her work, Miriam Buendia Castro. Oh, thank you so much for your question. You know her.
About phraseology.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the question and for the answer too. Thanks a lot, Juan Carlos, and to Melania too, that has taken part as well.
She couldn't be here, but she also extends her appreciation to the organization of the whole conference, of course.
Thanks for your effort. And now I will try to share my own presentation. Let me do that. Okay. I'm doing that for you. Right, so compartir contenido. Okay. Right. So from the very beginning, I can't. Okay, I should change my own function. Otherwise, I can't do that. Right, now I can. Right. Good. So let me do that. Before introducing myself and being able to do it. Right. I was wondering whether it is visible. I think so. Yeah, it is. It is visible. Good. So I will introduce myself once more. My name is Eva Llorens Simón from the University of Alicante. Can you hear me properly this time? Hopefully. Good.
Yeah.
And the communication I am presenting is emotional and cognitive aspects in tourism discourse, and particularly a strategy which is nominalizing adjectives in English and Spanish. These are the languages I'm dealing with. So as I told you, my presentation is about cognitive linguistics, particularly concerning emotions and cognitive processes involved in tourism discourse. And, you know, the specific feature I've analyzed with this research, as I told you, is the nominalization of adjectives in English and Spanish, considering that it has a persuasive effect, right? So let me check if this works. Can you see the second one? I think so, right. So on this point, I established some, you know, some general goals based on real materials and the actual use of languages. And I decided to explore prototypical texts, compiling them as a corpus, you know, to confirm the extent to which these cognitive and affective aspects are evident in tourism industry, and particularly in tourism language. And moreover, I try to identify these key adjectives under the nominalizing process to study their impact on persuasive texts by quantifying and qualifying their frequency, but also their intensity and their polarity, with the intention of, you know, offering a sort of first insight into the persuasive and strategic value they may have. And, you know, some of the contents I've included in this communication are these ones, okay? You know, it includes an introduction offering information about tourism discourse as a professional language, okay, with this persuasive perspective concerning the language of tourism, which is considered a language for specific purposes. And then, you know, the cognitive and emotional impact is briefly reasoned. The specific methodology I followed is also clarified then. And, you know, particularly what I followed is the corpus analysis and the sentiment analysis too, both of them being the basis of the research. And after that, some examples and utterances are given in context to visually show what way nominalizing adjectives can be a persuasive strategy, or at least strategically persuasive, let me say so. And after that, comparative data are graphically offered, okay, to show the significance of nominalization, as I taught you, in both languages. And then results are given with a percentage format, okay, to make the impact understanding easier and clearer. And finally, a collection of initial conclusions is listed, right? As I taught you, as a first insight, and with some future prospects mentioned as well, along with the references after that, okay? So Okay, so as I told you before, and as an introductory consideration, bearing in mind the representative sense of the materials under analysis, I must mention that language of tourism is defined as a professional language, as I taught you. Hence, the convenience of studying its main features, as they are a tool for the specialists who follow the same structures or are supposed to follow the same structures to reach similar communicative goals, okay, or even the same communicative goal by using formal language, prototypical language, and a formal register that can be identified too. And particularly the, the section, what I've studied is the persuasive language in tourism, right? Taking into account that, tourism discourse also includes terminology from other disciplines and even from general language. Really, my first insight is related to persuasion and tourism as a language for specific purposes, as I said, with linguistic items being analyzed, right, as a starting point. And then, I intend in the future to study other approaches for persuasion in tourism. On this case, persuasion is understood as a social interaction or as a marketing campaign, or it may be integrated in business, or even I would like to study business and meta-discourse based persuasion, for example. So, right. So the question defining why cognitive and emotional processes are analyzed is related to the significance of these effects when nominalizing adjectives for persuasion, for a persuasive purpose. And I'd like to point out that I'm referring to adjectives under nominalization or nominalizing adjectives as a process, because both nominalized adjectives with no change in the format and nouns created from adjectives with suffixes have been considered, okay, in a global sense. So on this point, as I mentioned in the table of contents, in the goal section 2, frequency, polarity, and intensity are evaluated, okay, to show that the cognitive sense, the emotional effect is present there. And, the initial methodology I've followed is that I've compiled texts and I've created a medium-sized corpus for each language, right, from the institutional websites of the top 10 destinations in Britain and in Spain. And I can accept that they have a representative character, and the data we can find there have a representative character too. So I'm referring to web contents published online with a promotional approach and a recent updating process. And frequency, as I mentioned before, frequency in this nominalization process is the first step, right? To start with the theorization, let me say. So here you can find the info corresponding to each corpus, the one in English and the one in Spanish. I think that it's important to base our attention or center our attention on the number of words in each corpus and the number of nouns, particularly the number of nouns. Because, the nominalization strategy I've mentioned is accounted among nouns. Okay, so the items I've been analyzing are really nouns, not exactly adjectives. Nouns coming from adjectives, but not exactly adjectives. So this is the reason why the number of nouns is relevant. And as you can see visually and easily, is that the amount of nouns in Spanish is significantly higher than the one in English, okay? And it is relevant information to consider the results I will deal with. And then along with the frequency analysis, I've also initially and manually, not automatically, analyzed the sentiment. Sentiment analysis and the cognitive effect evaluation. And for that, once frequently nouns coming from adjectives or adjectives under nominalization are identified, you know, positive or negative connotations are attributed to evaluate the polarity, the extent to which it affects emotions or cognitive processes in human beings as addressees. And then the semantic strength or the semantic charge is also graded in terms of intensity. So all these aspects are considered as a combination, okay, to show the extent to which the cognitive effects or the sentiment is triggered and fostered, somewhat fostered. And, you know, in this way, the first insight I can give is the one into emotional and cognitive impact, which is likely to be arranged that way according to the authors I've considered. And, you know, here are some utterances, okay? Right, for example, with attraction. Attraction is not exactly a nominalized adjective, but it can be considered that here, attraction in English is attractive destination, okay? And it is one of the most frequently used, let me say, adjectives under nominalization, which is nouns coming directly from the usual option of the adjective. And you know, it is the most typical in English. But those who respond more to the pattern, these ones. For example, popularity coming from popular, the quality of being popular. And you have an example here. In 2018, Liverpool slipped from the 5th to the 6th place, and in terms of popularity, I think that here we can easily detect the impact of the nominalization. Okay, saying something about popularity is probably more significant than saying something about being popular, right? So the persuasive effect, although somewhat subjective at some points, is probably more evident with the nominalization. And then the nominalized adjectives strictly considered as so, such as, for example, elderly, probably show better the, you know, the effect I'm trying to describe. Considering elderly as those who are old, right? So saying that for the elderly, it can be a challenge to find suitable things to do, we're giving more importance for the elderly than saying old people, right? Taking into account as well that this is a question of a natural character, not just a question of nominalization. I mean, in terms of natural options, the elderly is more frequent and probably more natural, right? And now, curiously enough, I've used the same example in Spanish, and I've used atractivo, right? Atractivo used as a noun, considering it as an attractive feature, being used quite frequently in Spanish, but with a different meaning. Intereses de la comunidad universitaria y un mayor atractivo del transporte público. So, as I told you, curiously enough, in English it was considered, or it was defined as attractive destination. But in Spanish, it is attractive feature, attractive characteristic. So here we can see that the prototypical use of languages, of terms in languages, has an effect on the cognitive processes, because addressees have expectations towards what they are reading and they are receiving. Another option, another example I can see here is sostenibilidad, okay, coming from sustainable. Barcelona cuenta con la certificación Biosphere World Class Destination, which is el sello de sostenibilidad. Okay, so probably speaking about sostenibilidad is more enthusiastic than saying just sustainable, okay? It's difficult to explain that the reasons are related to polarity, intensity, and frequency, but the combination helps, right? The explanations related to the combination adjectives with discapacitados, for example, those who are disabled. If we speak about people disabled, that's okay, but if we say los discapacitados y sus acompañantes, the persuasive effect, or at least the impact, the cognitive impact and the emotional one, are quite evident, or at least more strategic in terms of persuasion. And with the comparative data in front of us, we can see that the amount of nouns, as I told you before when I gave the specific data, you know, the amount of nouns, generally speaking, is considerably higher in Spanish than in English, but with the same tendency, okay? And the, you know, the amount of adjectives and the nominalization, yes, it is higher in Spanish than in English, but anyway, in both languages, the values are minimal, right? Nominalization is not a very typical strategy. So I need to interpret that as a first insight, as I told you. The percentages are available here in this slide. You can see 2.5% of nominalization of adjectives in English and 14.7% in Spanish. And I know that time flies and I'm not adjusting time, so sorry. I will do it quickly. But with these percentages here, what you can see is the strategy itself of nominalization is an exclusive one, both in English and in Spanish. And the frequency is probably, you know, different because the indicators are above 30 in English and above 18 in Spanish. So we repeat with fewer items in Spanish, whereas in English, the repetition is not a problem, according to these frequency indicators. And then I think that the relevant percentage in Spanish is the one corresponding to the positive polarity. We almost exclusively use this nominalization to express positive connotations, whereas in English, it doesn't happen. In English, okay, a high percentage of the nominalization is to highlight positive polarity, but neutral one and negative one are also considered. And the same happens with the semantic strength, but the other way around. In English, more intense options, and in Spanish, you know, intensity is not a real strategy according to the comparative percentages we can see here. And I go directly to conclusions. First conclusion, very quickly. You know, in English, higher frequency than in Spanish, where we can find a higher variety of items. In Spanish, almost exclusively positive polarity, whereas in English, the tendency is a little bit more open. And in English, the semantic strength is higher than in Spanish. They seem to be more repetitive, but by using more enthusiastic, more cognitive-based or emotional-based items. And for future prospects, I must mention that I will complete the insight, the first steps with, you know, these approaches related to meta discourse, social interaction, and so on. And these are the references I based my research on. And the only thing I can say now after a quite long morning is thank you so much for your attention, for your interest, and I'm available for any questions you may have. Thank you so much again. Okay, I will stop. Otherwise, I can't see what you are asking, if so. Right, so no questions on the chat. I can understand it's really late. I will wait a little bit, just in case. But, you know, just, I don't know if I should use English or Spanish now to close the session. I will do it in Spanish because most of you, okay, or it is presented in Spanish. Okay, no problem. Spanish, English, thank you so much for your share and to receive the knowledge you've been sharing. Muchas gracias a todos por las contribuciones, por la participación. Yo particularmente he de decir que he aprendido mucho de todos y bueno, espero que tengamos ocasión de vernos pronto, aunque sea físicamente, porque eso significará que las circunstancias nos lo permiten y que podemos continuar en mejores condiciones dentro de poco. Una vez más, muchísimas gracias a todos y seguimos esta tarde. Gracias por el esfuerzo y por la participación. Muchas gracias. Y con esto entiendo que doy por concluida la sesión 11C y, bueno, detengo también la grabación para los efectos oportunos. Me he puesto muy legal ahora mismo.